any club that gets promoted to the Premier League and then gets a top half finish has to view that as a successful season. And I think if we remember the last time Fulham got promoted, a lot of us might have been sceptical over whether they'd secure Premier League status this year. Last time it went so poorly, but the difference was they came up this time with an incredible manager in Marco Silva, a great squad of players. They were really wise in the transfer market, and it just looked like it was always going to be a success from the opening day of the season for Fulham, didn't it, really?
And this time, Alexander Mitrovic carried his Championship form into Premier League form.
Yeah, he did. That's a good point. It's a good point. And he did that straight away as well. I remember watching the Liverpool game on the opening day of the season, and I don't think I'm the only one who kind of expected Liverpool to come out the traps fast and like really blow a championship team away. And instead, Fulham played excellently. Like they got a point in that game. They could have easily had three.
They should have won the game, I think.
Yeah, but from that moment onwards, honestly, it felt like Fulham were just on an upward trajectory. And that was a really important way to start the season. If they had been embarrassed early doors, you wonder what effect that might have had on their confidence. But this squad looked really well equipped for it, didn't it? Including some of the new additions like Paulinho, an amazing signing, and Andreas Pereira from Man United.
I think the fact that they were able to bring in those sort of players, especially Paulinho, was earmarked as a massive talent in Portugal. And performed really well actually for Portugal in recent months. I think it speaks volume to what they're trying to do and the project that they're pushing towards these players that are buying into the idea of the club. And I think they've had such a successful team season. And like you mentioned there, I think the main thing for me is the last time they were in the league, I think a lot of the foundations and the basics, they weren't solid enough in. We mentioned the defence and in midfield. They've identified that. If you look in defence, Tim Ream's had a magnificent season.
Where did that come from?
I know. From fullback positions, obviously, like Robinson and Tete have provided a lot of attacking threat from those positions, have kind of transitioned from defence into attack really effectively. And then you mentioned the midfield, who've been great. That's been Pereira. I've always known as a United fan that he's had everything as a player, but he just couldn't put it all together in a United shirt. And we're actually seeing what he's capable of this season in the Fulham shirt, and I'm really happy to see him playing so well. To be fair,
United are a good one to mention though, really, because if we think about key events in Fulham's season, I do think that the FA Cup loss to United was the start of a bit of a decline towards the end of the season, sadly. After that loss and Mitrovic's suspension, they only beat the teams in the bottom four. And actually, it did look at one stage like Fulham might push for a European place. Now, they've not finished that far off it. 10th is fantastic. They finish above Chelsea. But that suspension to Mitrovic, did that kill their season off a little bit or kill any momentum that they were taking into the run-in, as we call it?
I think it did. And obviously 8 games is a long time to be out for as well. And I'm sure it's frustrating for a lot of Fulham fans because they're probably thinking what could have been if he'd have been available for those games. Because although they've got Carlos Vinicius, he's a steady player, I don't think he's good enough really to be replacing those goals, which obviously Mitrovic has given them this season. And I think that's probably a position they'll be earmarking in the transfer window of a position they could probably bolster in, because if they haven't got Mitrovic, if Mitrovic gets a bad injury, then kind of what do you go with next season? They're actually really lucky that so many players have contributed. And we mentioned, didn't we, on the pod, I think it was in February, in a piece we did on Fulham, that 12 players at that point had scored at least one goal in the squad, and no other team in the Premier League had as many goal scorers, which is crazy.
It's really interesting.
They ended on the season with 8 players with 3 or more assists in all competitions, which is really good. And just shows you that kind of they're all buying into it. They're all really...
It shows you the success of Silva's system as well, doesn't it? Because that's for me, that's the fundamental difference. Marco Silva, we knew he was a good coach. He came over to England with such a big reputation, and then he had that spell at Hull where it didn't go as well as he wanted, but he still left with a lot of credit. That spell at Watford where Everton then came in and poached him, and it kind of went off from there. This feels like the right setup for him. It feels like the best club he's been at in England, and we're seeing him get the best results as well. So what do Fulham do from now to kick on? Because I think you said they seem established in the Premier League already after just one season. I can't envisage Fulham falling off next season and being in some sort of relegation battle. Do they have it in them to kick on and go further than 10th?
Well, they need to, don't they? I think the main thing for me is recruit smartly again. It's easier said than done, but
Fred's one of them apparently, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it'd be a good buy for them personally. If they can get him for a decent price, and to be honest, with United's dealing, they should be able to get him. They should be able to get him 5 million because just so.
They'll send him Donny van de Beek as well.
Yeah, well, 2 for 1.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
I think they've really got to try and keep hold of Palhinha. I think he's the glue in that midfield. If they can keep hold of him for another season, because he's just so talented. And to be fair, any team that comes in for him, they'll be asking for a lot of money because he really is so talented. He can definitely play in Champions League level for me, I think.
Yeah.
I don't really want to keep going banging on about him. A lot of Fulham fans will be a bit annoyed that
we're touting him for someone else. Yeah,
but,
fair play.
Yeah, it's those important players. I think, like you mentioned, we mentioned Mitrovic. They'd probably need another striker who's can contribute with goals. They're lucky to have had Willian came back in. We've not mentioned him. Did really well for them, and I think a lot of us were wondering why they're bringing Willian, who looks like he's on the verge of retirement, and he's actually played brilliantly as well. So
better than we ever saw him at Arsenal.
They need more depth. That's the main thing for me. They need more depth in those key areas. They've got some really talented young players in there who've definitely got a big future at the club. So we'll see what comes next season. Yeah.